Today in n8n, we're going to be covering the sentiment analysis AI node. Essentially what this allows us to do is take a piece of text and then also classify the sentiment behind it. And sentiment could be something like, hey, this was a positive piece of information, this was negative, or if it's in between, it's going to be classified as neutral. We're going to go through about 5 different examples showing you all the different types of settings and use cases within the particular node. After that, we're going to actually go into an advanced use case, which is going to use HuggingFace, because HuggingFace has specific sentiment models based around a specific domain. And that way you can really optimize your sentiment analysis for your specific use case. Really quick though, before we do jump into n8n, if you guys want to join a community full of people that are interested in learning AI, learning how to freelance with these brand new skills, or just interested in data in general to help out their business, I have a free school community, which is going to be linked down below in the description and in the comment section. I'm super active in there and I'd love to see you join our community. With that out of the way though, let's jump right into n8n. So we're here in n8n and let me show you first where we can find this node. So 2 different options to finding it. Click the plus icon. You can search in sentiment. You can find this over here, or we can go through AI. So just go AI, scroll down, and then you'll see sentiment analysis. It says analyze the sentiment of your text. Let's just jump into some of the basics over here first, and then we'll talk about why you want to use sentiment analysis in our first example. So over here, what we're going to see first is our text to analyze. You'll either paste this in or drag in JSON to analyze our text. And then you have a bunch of different properties. So like sentiment categories, system prompt, which I always recommend tweaking system prompts, detailed results, like why are we going with this certain sentiment, enable auto fixing, and then batch processing. So pretty straightforward node. Now I want to talk about this and some other alternative nodes. So first, what is sentiment analysis? So sentiment analysis is a natural language processing technique, which, not to cut this off, you'll often see this abbreviated as NLP. So if you ever see someone talking about NLP, that's natural language processing. That automatically identifies and extracts emotion tone from text, determining whether expressed opinion is positive, negative, or neutral. You can see by default, we have these 3. It's commonly used to analyze reviews, social media posts, and feedback to understand public opinion about products, brands, or topics. So hopefully that gets your head spinning like, oh man, there's a lot of different use cases for this within your n8n workflows. Type of text classification. So this is considered a sort of text classification. So we're actually going to have a broader video just talking about the text classification node. And you can see that we actually have a node for it. And you can see it's called text classifier. So text to classify it, and you can set up specific categories. So a little bit different than this one, which this is primarily focused on sentiment. This is focused on specific text. And, in n8n, we can go and base our sentiment off of different branches. So if it's positive, we can make our workflow go in one direction. If it's negative, we can make our workflow go into another direction. And again, right, you can watch your brand on social media for negative news. You can classify support messages. There's a lot that you could do. In addition, by the way, I did want to note that you could also technically do sentiment analysis through an AI agent. And you can go over here and grab an AI agent. And there's a few differences on the AI agent side of things as well. So I already showed you text classifier is different. With our AI agent, we also have access to memory, which this doesn't. We also have access to tools, which our sentiment does not. And then we also have access to an output parser. And you can just go over here for a specific output, which our sentiment analysis does not, right? Our sentiment analysis is either positive, neutral, or negative. Again, we can change these over here, and I'll show you how we could do that. Whereas our AI agent has one branch, and we could do decisioning after, but it outputs in one direction. So there is that. So let's kind of jump into our first example. What we're going to do is make no changes to this, minus one other tweak. We're going to actually include detailed results because I want to see the strength and the confidence associated with the text that we're analyzing. So you can see that in this example, this video is decent, only showed the basics, so I wish it went in more details. So this is a neutral branch because it's not really positive, it's not really negative. It's saying the video is okay and what they wished. So it makes sense for this to be our neutral branch. This is actually our third example over here, but you'll see the strength of this is 0.5. It's very confident it's a neutral on that side of things. So just going in over here for these detailed results, note these scores are estimated, generated by the large language model, are rough indicators rather than precise measurements. I grabbed that directly from the n8n documentation. The strength is the intensity or degree of the sentiment being expressed, and then confidence is how certain or sure the analysis is about its classification. So you could be like super negative, or you can be super positive, or just down the middle, like that text over here. And then the confidence, you can see this was like a 0.95 confidence because it was very confident that that was neutral. Also, what I have over here, I just added in a chat model GPT-5 mini. Depending when you're watching this, this might be deprecated. So make sure to use a model in here that is not deprecated. And there's a lot of different options in n8n. So you can just go over here. I'm just going to remove this here for a second, and you can choose what you want. I'm just using OpenAI for a lot of these videos because I feel like most people have this, and it's one of the first ones that are really set up when you or learn about. So I'm just going to use on that approach. So let me show you what's going to happen if we go for this first one. I can't stand Ryan. He uses right too many times in videos, which is true. Like looking back at some of my videos I've done, I said right way too many times. So maybe you absolutely hated that. We're going to execute this step. Poking fun of myself a little bit, but that's fine. And you can see it's in the negative branch, right? This has been labeled as negative. The strength of the negative is 0.85, and it's 0.93 confident that is negative. Let's take a look at a positive. I love this tutorial. I can't wait to join your school community, which school is misspelled, which is amazing, but that's fine. We will fix that. We'll go over here, execute the step, and you'll see this will jump into the positive branch over here. Strength is 0.95, and then the confidence is 0.96. So that's where we have things include detailed results. And what's nice too is since this is pasted as the output, we can do additional filtering based off the strength or confidence if we specifically wanted to or not. So that is our first example. Really didn't change much. We just talked about the strength and the confidence. So now let's jump into our second example, and we can actually change our categories. So we aren't limited to 3. In fact, we can change as many as we want in over here. And just to show you, for example, we're going to change this up to constructive, toxic, or off topic. So what we have over here is add options, and then you can see we have sentiment categories. So each category is separated by a comma, and I can just go over here and say constructive, toxic, or off topic. And then you'll see this has changed. So above we have positive, neutral, negative. Let's say, and I'm not going to do it for this example. You could put NA, no, why not? It again, doesn't really matter, and you'll see this has been expanded out. Now for this example, we're just going to include these 3 on over here. So we're going to include constructive, toxic, and off topic. Next, so by default, the system prompt that we're given is your highly intelligent and accurate sentiment analyzer. Analyze the sentiment of the provided text, categorize it using one of the following categories. So it actually grabs these categories dynamically, which is pretty cool. Use the provided formatting instructions, only output the JSON. And again, this is default. So if I go over here and go to system prompt, you can see that's been built in over here. So I'm going to rewrite my version over here, and I'm going to say you're an assistant that analyzes user-generated comments and classifies them into one of 3 categories. So again, I'm using this dynamic categories. Use the provided formatting instructions, only output JSON. So I'm just going to copy that, and we're going to paste that in over here. So again, we just modified system prompt. We modified our sentiment categories. And then I'm just going to copy these examples. So example 1, I think the new node is great. However, I wish there was an option to calculate the median. So let's see what happens on this side of it. So we're going to paste this in, and this should be constructive. And we're going to execute the step. And you'll see it's labeled as constructive. Okay, let's take a look at our next example. And it says, you clearly have no idea what you are talking about. Man, that hurts. That's pretty toxic, man. So we're going to go over here and toxic branch. Lastly, let's take a look. Check out my YouTube channel for free giveaways. Good old YouTube spam. And let's grab that. We'll paste that in over here. Lots and lots of spam on YouTube. And you can see this is labeled as off topic. So above we had positive, neutral, negative. This time we can label this constructive, toxic, or off topic. And I want to show you, like, you are not limited. In fact, I actually prompted ChatGPT to give me more examples of sentiment analysis. So we have just some over here. So general purpose. So you could set this up at a very positive, positive, neutral, negative, very negative, a 5-point scale. You have others over here. Emotion-based categories: love, hate, calm, anxious, content, or upset. Customer feedback, business context, social media, online discussion, task specific. So what I'd recommend on the sentiment side of things, if you have a specific use case, if positive, neutral, negative works for you, awesome. If not, feel free to switch it up. You can go and ask a large language model, what type should I put in over here, and ask for some help also building out a system prompt. Obviously start with what's been built in. And again, just go over here, start with this and provide that as an example and say you want to expand it for a specific use case. And I think that will help you build out your sentiment analysis node. So again, if you want to pause the video and take a look at some of these, go for it. Again, I just generated these and I just wanted to show you that there's quite a lot that we could do. All right, so this is awesome. But these are just general purpose sentiment analysis. One of the best ways to actually do sentiment analysis, and how I first learned about it before even knowing about n8n, is something called HuggingFace. Now, what's really nice about HuggingFace is people have built out sentiment analysis models based around training data sets. So what does that mean? Well, there's different types of categories you might want to do sentiment analysis on. Let's say you're doing something specifically on social media, or you're doing something based around finances or law. Well, there's people out there or companies out there that literally their goal for their model is just to focus on sentiment analysis for financial reporting. And they trained a model based around all of that data. So it's really good at finding the sentiment behind financial data. Whereas these over here, nothing wrong with it, but it's broad. So this wouldn't perform as well as, for example, a specific HuggingFace model that's been built for sentiment analysis on financial data. So what I wanted to do is show you how we could set this up here in n8n. I know it's technically not the sentiment analysis node, but I think this is really, really impactful if you have a non-broad use case. If you have something hyper-focused, I think it's really, really important to look and learn how HuggingFace works. And this is how I set it up. I used a post request in HTTP, and I put over here as well a switch node after, so we can set it to our specific branch. So let me show you first HuggingFace. And this isn't going to be a HuggingFace full tutorial. In fact, I might want to do this here in the future because I think HuggingFace has a lot of opportunities here within n8n. So I'm just going to huggingface.co/models, and this gives me all of the models that are on this platform. There's tons. And this looks very confusing here. Initially, you're like, man, what does this mean? There's tasks, there's parameters, there's libraries, like, oh, we have PyTorch, TensorFlow. Like, this seems very, very technical. And listen, it is. But I'm going to try to make this super basic for you. I actually wrote down some steps over here. So the first thing we want to do is we just want to grab text classification. As I mentioned above, and I apologize for keep going back and forth, but sentiment analysis is a form of text classification. So what we want to do first is just filter for text classifier models. So we just go over here to tasks, and now we need to look for our specific thing. And again, we're looking for text classification. So we can just go over here and search text classification, and you can see it's under natural language processing, NLP. So you have classification, generation, ranking. Well, this is a classification task. So let's just do classification. Now we're down to 103,000 different models. So tons and tons. You can see all these different names over here. We have different ways to sort. You can sort by trending, most likes, most downloads, recently created, recently updated. We're just going to do trending. And then what we're going to do is we're going to search sentiment, because there's a lot of different tasks for text classification. We just want to do sentiment. So we go over here, sentiment, and then you can see we're dropped down into 6,000 models, which is still a ton. So what I'd recommend, if you have a specific use case, like really do some research. Possibly you want to prompt a large language model. You can also prompt Perplexity, say, hey, I'm trying to do sentiment based around this. Is there some good Hugging Face models? And what I would recommend is you do some testing. You test it with this approach over here. You test it broad and you see what works better for you. So what we're going to do on this side of it is we're going to look at a classic social media example. So this Twitter one, and this was actually what I learned about, I want to say a few years ago. You can see this was last updated in 2023. I can't remember when this was initially built. And this is when I was jumping into kind of like machine learning and things like that. This one has a reference into 2022. I do remember someone covering this in a Python coding video as well, which is really cool. It's to see kind of a throwback. You can see this has been downloaded 2.6 million times last month. So this is a pretty good model. And what it says over here, let's look at our description. This is a multilingual XLM Roberta base model trained on 198 million tweets and fine-tuned for sentiment analysis. So if you're doing some sort of social media analysis based off of different posts and different things like this, this would be something you would want to really take a look at. The sentiment fine-tuning was done on 8 languages. So you can see over here, if your language is in over here, maybe you want to specifically use it. Again, this is a little bit outside the scope of the video, but when you're taking a look at sentiment analysis, just make sure the model that you're using is based around your language, because there's a lot of different language differences out there. I only know English, maybe that's a negative thing, but I didn't grow up learning a second or third language as people in Europe do, or South America. So unfortunately, I just don't have that information over here to really talk about those nuances on that side of things. They go over here, talk about example pipelines, some code as well. But I just want to show you how we could set this up. You can also see for output, it has positive, neutral, as well as negative. So this is just the score, and you can see all this adds up to 1. So whatever is in that highest position, we'll say, okay, well, this is mostly positive. If neutral was like 0.76, this is mostly neutral. If negative was like 0.8, it's mostly negative. So we want to do our filtering based around that specific output. So that's our example. Let me show you how we're doing this. Additionally, we can't actually add this in as a text classifier model over here. So you can see how it adds in a model. I did some testing and it just would not work for me. So this is the approach that I used over here with this HTTP request. In the future, I can see this changing here in n8n, because I find this to be quite inefficient. n8n still has a ways to go when it gets into kind of advanced stuff like this. So again, I could see this being on the n8n roadmap. Probably not the most important thing for them, but in the future, this will change. And when it does change, I will make a video specifically on it, because I think there's, again, a ton of use cases. You'll get better results if you use a Hugging Face model. So what we're doing over here, edit fields, I'm just going to do a tweet. And yesterday, 2 bands I listened to, Currents as well as Trivium, just released EPs. So I'm just going to have the tweet, the new Currents and Trivium EPs are great. Obviously, it's super positive, really easy. Next, what we're going to do is set up a post request. What we're going to do is use this URL. One thing to note is the URL recently changed. So if you see some old examples of API inference.huggingface.co, this is deprecated as of today. Actually, November 1st, I believe they rolled this out. This should no longer work. So make sure you use this URL, router.huggingface.co/ I'm using HF inference / models. And then I just paste in this model, which you can grab literally just by going over here to the model name and clicking copy, which I didn't know that for the longest amount of time. I always just, copied this over here, and now I know. So we have that. I set up a predefined credential. I just set in my Hugging Face API. So grab your Hugging Face API key and then paste it in over here on that side of it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to send a body. We're going to send a JSON body. We're going to set in a body parameter of inputs. And then I'm literally just going to input in our tweet. So this tweet over here, drag and drop that in. Let let me execute this previous step. Let me actually put in a manual trigger over here. Sometimes it asks for it, sometimes it doesn't here in n8n. This time it did. So what we're going to do is execute this step. And then you'll see we have this over here. All I did for inputs is just drag and drop this tweet in. Okay, very, very basic. And then what we're going to do is execute this step. So let's take a look at the sentiment behind the new currents and Trivium EPs are great. I'm going to click execute step. It's going to take a little bit because this is an API call over into here. And you can see we have our breakdown. So positive is 0.92, neutral is 0.05, and negative is 0.1. So obviously positive is what this is around. You can tweak this and change things out. And what we have next is this switch. So all I did is say, hey, if our first score over here is greater than 0.6, it's positive. And you can actually change this to what you want and kind of tune this. So you could say, hey, I only want 0.7 or greater. I only want 0.8. Like you have this flexibility, which is really, really nice. For the negative, we could grab this score over here. I just drag and drop this into the switch. I say this is greater than 0.6, which by the way, you have to go over here to number and then choose that one over here is greater than. Again, you can change this. You can say, oh, if it's greater than 0.4, I want this to be negative 0.7. I would test this out first and see like what you're happy with these numbers. I just put 0.6 for this video. And then what I have next is I say I have a fallback output. So I say extra output. If it doesn't hit this criteria, if it doesn't hit 0.6 for positive or 0.6 for negative, I'm just going to bucket this as neutral. And then you can see we have positive, negative, and neutral. So a little bit extra work on this side of things, but we're getting a way better approach. Like this is going to lead to more accuracy if we're trying to measure social media posts based around their sentiment than if we use this particular node. Again, nothing wrong with this node, but if you really, really want something that works and has been trained for that, I would just recommend that you use this. Let me show you another example on this side of it. So imagine you want to look at financial documents and you want to find the sentiment behind that. So as I mentioned, there's like well over 6,000 models for sentiment just on HuggingFace. I just use this one over here called Finbert. And you can see this has a lot of downloads as well. And to give you a little bit of information, Finbert is a pre-trained NLP model to analyze sentiment of financial text. It's built by further training BERT language model in the finance domain using a large financial corpus and thereby fine-tuning it for financial sentiment classification. And it talks about this as well. There's research papers associated with it. The model will give soft max outputs for 3 labels, positive, negative, and neutral, which again, we have positive, negative, neutral. So make sure you set these up correctly. On that side of things, we have a little bit more about different things like that across the board. So what we can do is the same exact approach. This time over here, I just put this model. So you can see process and then Finbert. And if I mispronounce this, I apologize. So again, just copy this over on this side of it. And I just put inputs finance, which this time I just put edit fields. So I haven't tested this out. I just built it for the video. So let's take a look at this. The company reported record quarterly earnings that exceeded analyst expectations by 15%, driven by strong consumer demand, improved operational efficiency. Management raised full year guidance and announced a new share buyback program. So let's just copy that in. We'll paste that on this finance string. We're going to execute this step, and then we're going to go and test this out. All right, so I'm back. I'm not sure actually what was happening with this first model that I was using. I switched to another financial news sentiment model, which is this one over here. And again, just to show you guys that like not everything's always going to be perfect, but I use this one, which looked pretty good, 517,000 downloads. And this ended up working. So let me just show you really fast how we can set this up. So all I did to set this up is I clicked over here, view code snippets, and I grabbed this C URL curl, and I just copied this. I went over here to our HTTP request. I said import in curl, and then I pasted this in. Only things that I changed is I just pasted in this finance value, which I put in the edit set, and I used my HuggingFace credentials over here, same exact body. I increased the timeout request over here because I was thinking the other one was just having timeout issues. Again, wasn't sure what happened. But you can see over here, this example gave super positive results, very low negative, very low neutral. And again, it can just go into the switch and base it around that. So, and if you do find you're having some issues sometimes with a particular model, feel free to switch it out. And you can see this one, it says this model is a fine-tuned version of this financial phrase bank data set. It achieves the following results on the evaluation set, loss, and then accuracy. It talks a little bit more about it. Over here, it talks about the training data. Data set consists 4840 sentences from English language, financial news categorized by sentiment, and then agreement rate of 5 to 8 annotators. Annotators are people that take a look at it and then actually define, like, is this positive, negative, or neutral? It gives the training results over here, a little bit more information as well. So that's essentially it. And again, just to kind of recap what we covered in this video. So I showed you by default how we can use sentiment analysis. It starts with positive, negative, neutral. We can go in here, we can change the sentiment categories. We can also change the system prompt, which I highly recommend that you do, even if you're just using just positive, negative, neutral, just based off of the use case. Also, we have the strength and confidence, but this is just based off of our chat model over here. Whereas it's gonna be a lot more accurate if we use specifically HuggingFace. Then just jumping into this next example over here. If you're gonna want to use a sentiment analysis model that's more accurate and fine-tuned for a specific use case, you're gonna have to use HuggingFace. Currently, you wanna use an HTTP request, paste in the URL, different things like that. You can get the information by just going over here, view code snippets, doing curl, and then just make sure that inside over here, when you set up your HuggingFace API, you don't want to just have your API token in over here, just in case you share your workflow with someone. And that way it's also easier just to add in here in the future. And then based off of the results, which we go back over here because you saw them, the positive, negative, neutral, you can actually set up a switch, and then you can specify what number that you specifically want for those, and you can set a extra output on that side of things. If you want to learn more about Switch, I have a full video on that. And guys, that is sentiment analysis. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have like probably 50 plus n8n videos right now, a lot of other machine learning and data videos as well. If you want to join a community of other people that are interested in AI, data, and also making money on that side of things, freelancing, join my free school community. It is linked down below in the description. And yeah, if you want to learn more about n8n, check out my playlist. All right, I'll catch you guys in another video.